Cybermaterial presents Ask Me Anything Cyber, a fun, interactive weekly event for everything cybersecurity. Join us every week at noon Eastern Time for a high-energy, no-fluff recap of the week's biggest cyber stories. From data breaches and threat intel to major legal updates. Whether it's a high-profile hack, a new APT on the rise, or a must-attend summit, we've got it covered. But that's not all. We'll also break down the latest job market trends, share our thoughts on cyber stocks, and give you actionable insights to stay ahead. And of course, we wrap things up with what makes this show special, live Q&A with you. Have a question about a breach? Want to know how a threat works? Curious about getting started in cyber? Let us know and we'll answer it live. Without further ado, let's get this event started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Ask Me Anything Cyber. I'm so glad that you are joining us here today. And we've got an exciting agenda which covers an open discussion, a powerful case study, and practical takeaways you can apply right away. For those of you watching us live right now, this is an interactive session, which is what makes it very special. Please drop your questions into our LinkedIn or Substack chat, and we will answer them in this discussion live. I'm joined by my co host Sophia, the CTO of 911 Cyber, who brings deep hands on experience responding to breaches. Hi, Sophie. How are you doing today?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today.
And I'm honored to welcome our special guest, Bob Chaput. Bob is the founder and former CEO of Clearwater Security. Hi, Bob. How are you doing?
Good day. I'm doing well. Glad to be with you too.
Yeah, it's great to have both of you here. And before we get into the details of everything, I would love to hear more about your story, Bob. What first pulled you toward healthcare cybersecurity and why has it remained your focus?
Well, you can probably tell by the color of my hair. It's a long story, so I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of it. I've been involved in security probably since before many of your listeners were born. It goes back to the mid 1980s, but I'll fast forward the tape to the more current era. And it goes back to 2003, whereas many people bring a great novel to read on their spring or winter vacation. The HIPAA security rule was published in the Federal Register in February 2003, and that was my vacation reading. And I became quite interested in the opportunities that were there. I thought there were a lot of organizations that would need help with compliance. As it turned out, it was a bit of a bust because HIPAA security, privacy, there was not a breach notification rule, were not very well enforced in the beginning. So fast forward to 2009, and the so-called High Tech Act was passed that brought with it some significant changes to the HIPAA security
Yeah.
rule. I once again became excited about the opportunities to help organizations, especially in the area of cybersecurity and cyber risk management. There has been a bit more of an uptake in that regard, but I'll just say, and probably it'll be emphasized throughout our session today, the healthcare industry still has a great deal of work to do when it becomes, when it is related to not only compliance, but also cyber risk management. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Bob. And Sophia, as someone who responds to healthcare breaches like on the ground, what are the most common entry points attackers exploit today? And how quickly can those risks translate into patient impact?
Yeah, so I really like this question when they ask me because from my experience, like responding to healthcare breaches is on the ground. The most common entry point that I can say is that sometimes people take from granted is like phishing emails that they are targeting staff. They are unsecure remote access portals or some vulnerabilities in legacy systems that they haven't patched. So
Hmm.
once the attacker gains access, the timeline to patient impact can be very fast. So in some cases, it's almost immediate, like ransomware locking critical systems or delaying patient care. And I wanted to bring over some data here. Like according to the FBI IC3 report from last
Mhm.
year, the healthcare sector they experienced around 444 reported cyber incidents, and 238 of those were ransomware attacks. So we can see here how most of them they were the point of entry was the vulnerabilities in the systems or probably a phishing email that they were able to get through the staff. Now, in terms of your question, how fast these risks translate into patient impact, I can bring an example here that we talked about before in another event that we had. It was the Bastamo data breach in
Yeah.
Finland. And I remember this case, it was like not only the cyber criminal, they tried to um, target the provider, they also went after patients directly. They threatened to release highly sensitive mental health care records unless the victim paid a ransom. So
Yeah.
this kind of shows how fast a breach can move from technical incident to a real impact life, impacting people's life. In this case, in this was in Finland, and a lot of patients, they committed suicide, or they were like
Yeah.
very like in very health issues after this breach. So it's very important to also consider the patient's lives in this case.
Yeah, it was a therapy notes that got leaked, and it was a really messy situation. And then the government actually had to enact a few laws to better their security in healthcare with physiotherapy and therapy itself.
Yeah.
Bob, healthcare is often actually described as the number one target for cyber attacks. Why are healthcare organizations so uniquely vulnerable?
Well, probably the shortest answer is one that everyone knows. When posed with a question, Willie Sutton was posed with a question, "Why do you rob
Mhm.
banks?" That's where the money is.
Yeah.
And if you think about healthcare, think about four words that begin with the letter V. We have more voluminous data than any other industry right now. The data is more visible than ever because of all the increasingly greater number of access points and endpoints. The data is also more valuable than ever. Sometimes healthcare information is estimated to be as much as 50 times more valuable than something like my social security number. And given all of that, the first three B's, at the same time, it's more vulnerable than ever. And that gets to the fact that hospitals run very complex, interconnected systems. Unfortunately, a lot of them, notwithstanding the great blitz that came about as a result of the HITECH Act and electronic health records, a lot of them are still legacy systems. And as a consequence of that, organizations know that healthcare is going to be vulnerable. As early as 2014, I know Sophia mentioned FBI. Way back in 2014, the FBI published a so-called private industry notification that indicated across all of the 16 national critical infrastructure sectors in the United States, healthcare was the most vulnerable. And sadly, it remains the same today for all the reasons that I cited.
Yes, absolutely right, Bob. And it was actually even in our own report, like the one that we have in Hall of Hacks, healthcare actually always almost tops the list. Another question to you, Bob. You mentioned that cybersecurity is a governance issue, not just an IT issue. What do healthcare executive and boards need to do differently to fulfill their responsibilities?
I think probably the single most fundamental thing is to regard cyber risk management and cybersecurity in healthcare as a patient safety issue. It has been a longstanding belief of mine that that is the case. I remember once again going back in time in 2015, I was making a presentation to healthcare chief risk officers. And the title of my presentation was The First Cyber Driven Medical Malpractice Lawsuit. And it was a yawner. People were bored stiff. People were getting up and leaving the room because nobody made the connection between cybersecurity and patient safety. So the single biggest thing in my mind that board and hospital leaders can do is to place and position this matter of cyber risk management and cybersecurity as a patient safety issue, not as we hear it 1,000 times a day, an IT issue.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much for your answer, Bob. And it is actually true, isn't it, that people generally treat it as an IT issue and a tech issue. So, Sophie, my next question is to you. When like leadership engagement is missing, right? Responders are left like fighting and putting out the fires all by themselves. From your perspective, how does leadership involvement or the lack of it impact the success of the incident response in healthcare?
Yeah, so this is a great question because as part of a cybersecurity team, we're always
Yeah.
left fighting alone. So this is most like we need to involve the executive branch. So um, to fight this the cyber attacks. So when leadership is fully involved, we ensure there are clear priorities, resources, and decision making authority ready to give us the insight on how to respond and to act quickly, especially because there's some laws involved that we have to follow, how to notify patients, how to ensure that forensics are done properly. There's some
Yeah.
documentation. We are like ready to take like screenshots and save these data for later processing. So it's very important to always involve management and the executive branch so we can actually work as a team. And this is part of also the cybersecurity response plan to always get this side of the company also involved. And also, I know Bob can build on this because he wrote a book about how to involve the executives
Yeah.
in cybersecurity decision making. And it's very important to do that.
Yeah. So, like, Bob, what does a practical healthcare focused risk assessment like look like?
Well, first and foremost, it follows generally accepted and recognized, internationally recognized best practices. And in that regard, one can point to the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology
Hmm.
approach, which is well codified in something called Special Publication 800-39, and even more specifically in Special Publication 800-30. Additionally, there's an entire approach that's codified in the ISO standards as well. So I would be encouraging people from a practical point of view to not just make stuff up. Too many organizations believe that they can walk around the building with a clipboard and conduct a risk assessment. That's not what it's all about. In fact, just for a moment to get into the weeds slightly, it's about going through this systematic process where first and foremost, you identify your most critical assets. And in
Yeah.
healthcare, those critical assets are the ones that are associated with clinical processes. Secondarily, once you understand what your assets are, you need to consider all reasonably anticipated threats and vulnerabilities to those
Hmm.
assets. Once you've done that, you need to take stock of what controls, if any, that you have in place. And you may not have any, or you may have some. You need to net it out and consider, given the aforementioned asset, threat, and vulnerability, what's the likelihood of a bad thing happening? That is, the threat exploiting the vulnerability. Were that to happen, what would be the impact? And given the above, what would be an overall risk rating? So few organizations go through a systematic process like that, that it's
Yeah.
really moving up. So to be practical about it, focus on clinical processes, make it a patient safety or a patient focused cyber
Yeah.
risk management approach.
Thank you so much. So, the idea would be to make everything patient centric. But on the flip side, Sophie, when you walk into a breach, what are the biggest warning signs that the risk assessments were skipped or done like superficially?
Well, honestly, like in my experience, when you walk into a breach, you can see a few warning signs that usually stand out that risk assessments were skipped or, as you mentioned, done superficially. But first, like most of them, as I see unpatched systems or outdated medical devices that haven't been updated in months or even years, like there are some cases. And second is the weak access control, like, for example, staff using generic logins or shared passwords or excessive admin privileges. And I completely understand the medical staff that this happens, and because they are juggling with multiple credentials, portals, critical systems, and actually, it's not their job to actually like be cyber focused, but it's the security team that has to ensure that the
Yeah.
right safeguards are in place. And as a third thing, I can say like critical systems, they often lack proper monitoring or alerting. So breaches sometimes can go undetected for weeks or even months or years. There are some samples like that. And another one that I can also bring Bob into this one, it could be like some gaps in policies and training that are common, that staff may not recognize phishing attempts or know how to handle sensitive data. There are some cases that maybe some medical staff, they bring over home like a working computer and they use it for personal use, and you have like leak of personal information from other patients because they were not trained not to do that. But altogether, this signal like a risk assessment that they were thorough, I can say, and they leave the organization vulnerable, and this makes the incident response lower too.
Thank you so much, Sophie, for your answer. Bob, cybersecurity in healthcare, as you mentioned, needs to be more patient focused and patient centric. At a leadership level, how can executives and boards make that connection clear across their organization so that it becomes part of their, routine and culture?
So, at the risk of being a little bit redundant, because I think we've
Yeah.
mentioned this point several times now, it really is all about starting with the board and including the executive team to set the tone by framing cybersecurity and cyber risk management as an enterprise risk management issue that in healthcare is clearly associated with patient safety. That
Yeah.
means think about from a broad safety point of view, and speaking about chief risk officers in healthcare organizations, what are some of the things that they worry about? And in addition to individual spills and falls and things like that, they worry about infection control, they worry about medical errors. I mean, as far back as 1999, studies had shown that over 200,000 people a year were dying because of medical mistakes. That's a big issue in
Yeah.
the hospital. Sentinel events. What we need to do is position cyber risk on the same par with those kinds of issues that are on the agenda of a hospital chief risk officer. When staff, by setting the tone at the top, when other management and staff down to all members of the workforce see that tone being set, that's going to begin to make a difference. Now, the studies and the research are early on right now, but there's a growing body of research that is making the link, the connection between cyber events and patient safety or
Yeah.
patient outcomes. And I think we need to be, as they say, watch that space. Photos and images at 11. We need to be watching what's going on with the research, but
Yep.
certainly anecdotally, we are seeing this over and over again, that these ransomware attacks are shutting down emergency departments, patients are being diverted, not getting the care they need, and there are consequences associated with that, up to and including death in some cases.
That's actually really terrible to hear. We have a question on LinkedIn right now by Dennis, and he's asking, can ISO 2701 be used for HIPAA? Would OCR accept it?
Absolutely, unequivocally. If you look at the guidance that was published by OCR as far back as July of 2010, here we are 15 years later. And by the way, 91% of the organizations that have been investigated or audited by OCR are not doing risk analysis. Okay, put that aside. Let's get back to the question. Absolutely unequivocally, what the guidance states is that we don't care what methodology you use, as long as it includes these 9 essential elements. Number 1, a complete comprehensive information asset inventory. Number 2, consideration of all reasonably anticipated threats and vulnerabilities. Number 3, an assessment of existing controls in place, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I won't repeat all 9 essential elements. All of those are addressed and taken care of in whether you take the ISO approach or whether you take the NIST approach. So you are on very, very solid ground. Other techniques, the Octave methodology that came out of Carnegie Mellon University is another example of a methodology that is acceptable. As long as you read the guidance first and foremost, look at those 9 essential elements. It could be Billy Bob's risk analysis methodology, as long as you're following and including those 9 essential elements in your work.
Yeah, and just remember, like, it's not a substitute for HIPAA compliance, so you always need to be sure you're compliant with HIPAA as well.
Thank you so much, both of you, for your answers. And now let's move on into a real world case study. We're going to play a quick video on the Change Healthcare ransomware breach.
The cyber attack that shook U.S. healthcare. Early in February 2024, a devastating ransomware attack struck Change Healthcare. Within hours, critical systems went offline. Pharmacies and health systems across the U.S. reported massive disruption in prescription and billing services. The breach was traced to Black Cat Ransomware Group, exploiting a Citrix portal that lacked multi-factor authentication. Estimates suggest one-third of U.S. medical records under Change Healthcare could be compromised. States like Nebraska sued, citing inadequate cybersecurity and slow notification of patients. Reports confirm United Health Group paid a $22 million ransom. This breach underscores a simple truth: enforce MFA, audit vendor security, and keep your incident response playbook battle ready.
That was the Change Healthcare data breach, and you can read all about it from the weekly newsletter Cybercrime Stories by 911 Cyber. We covered this in detail. Thank you so much for watching that breakdown. This was one of the most disruptive healthcare cyber incidents in recent memory, and it really shook the confidence across the sector. I'd like to get both the perspectives of what we just saw, like both of your perspectives on what we just saw. Bob, the breach showed how the absence of something as basic as MFA can lead to nationwide disruption. What should healthcare leaders learn about prioritizing these foundational controls so they are not overlooked so often?
Yeah, I think the point obviously is pretty clear that if you forget some of the basics, there can be very, very significant consequences.
Yeah.
That gets to the whole matter of risk management. What's the likelihood of the bad thing happening, and were it to happen, what would be the impact? In this case, 190 million individuals' records were impermissibly disclosed. That's a mega HIPAA violation, among other things. The lesson for leaders is quite clear that you have to prioritize some of the fundamentals, enforce them without any exception at all, and hold your vendors to the exact same standards. And that clearly didn't happen here. There's a phenomena, the shiny object phenomena. Everybody's running after the latest new tool or gimmick or reporting mechanism. You've got to think about the basics. It also suggests that organizations need to have not only a long-term game, and that's all about a robust cyber risk management program with governance and people, processes, technology, engagement, et cetera, but you also have to have a short game. Things like multi-factor authentication, network segmentation, some of the basics. I used to give a talk and hypothetically pose you're a freshly minted chief information security officer, and you're in the honeymoon period. They love you so much, they give you $1 million. What do you do with that $1 million? You do two things. You work on your long game, your enterprise cyber risk management program, and you work on your short game. Make sure you understand that those basic fundamental controls like MFA are being addressed in the organization.
And Sophia, from your incident response perspective, how can healthcare organizations strengthen their resilience when a critical service provider is compromised, like it happened, and they do it through an exploited vulnerability?
Yeah, I mean, this is the classic of like it was overlooked because Citrix, they send an alert saying that you have to patch this. There's a vulnerability in the wide, you have to take care of it. So it looks like it was sort of overlooked by their cybersecurity team in this case. And when we look about like these type of incidents, the key takeaway is how quickly this single exploited vulnerability can disrupt the entire critical healthcare operation. So in this case, what I can say, as also Bob mentioned, is like resilience starts with the proactive measure. So what organizations needs to do to ensure is that all the critical systems, they are up to date. Of course, MFA is enabled to reduce the risk of credential compromise. Also, as Bob mentioned, network segmentation, monitoring, et cetera, et cetera. So this, having an incident response plan includes also simulations for vulnerabilities, also have an inventory of all the operating systems, all the services that you are being you have being provided by any other
Hmm.
third party vendor. So in this case, you have to minimize patient impact and operational disrupt by having this specific plan in place. And
Got it.
the reality is that you always have to keep in mind that the vulnerabilities, they will exist. And now is how you are prepared and how to detect, how to contain will make all the difference.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Sophie and Bob, for your answers. And I want to bring a community perspective here. A Reddit user described feeling confused and suspicious about the breach notifications and the offered remedies. You can check the story out on your screens right now. Many people actually did not even know that Change Healthcare had their personal data. But from a governance perspective, how should healthcare organizations take accountability when patients are affected through vendors they never interacted with directly?
Yeah, so that's interesting. And by the way, as we mentioned before, there are probably 190 million confused people out there.
Yeah,
Patients don't know or care what a healthcare organization's supply chain looks like. That's not my responsibility. If I'm receiving care from you or other healthcare related services from you, I rely on you. You are my go to. And
yeah,
in fact, what I just said is codified in the HIPAA regulations. The privacy rule and the security rule effectively create a chain of trust, chain of custody, if you will, that places the obligation on the frontline provider, not on a second, third, or fourth tier organizations that providing important services, no doubt, about what Change Healthcare does. And the key here is that if you go about outsourcing services, in this particular case, transaction processing services, um,
yeah,
you can't outsource the responsibility for privacy and security. And then once again, that's actually what the HIPAA regulations say. So you need to acknowledge this whole process from the patient's perspective. I'll go back and use that word again, a patient-focused approach to third-party risk management in this particular case.
thank you
Yeah.
so much, Bob, for
And
your
if,
answer.
if I
Yes.
can build a little bit on this, just to explain to this person, is like maybe this person was not a direct user of Change Healthcare, but probably, I don't know, they use Walgreens to fill out their prescriptions or to get any like insurance claim. So
Hmm.
because Walgreens was a user of Change Healthcare as a third party provider, it was a victim of this data breach. So this is like a also a third party vendor cyber crime, I can say, because it was not because Walgreens was hacked itself. It was because they were using Change Healthcare as a provider for insurance claims.
And
Okay.
if I could just underscore, you asked the question in the context of governance. So
Yep.
what was the management team is in the process of managing and leading and actually getting the work done. The board is responsible for oversight, if you will. So how does the board, from a governance point of view, get involved in this? They ought to be asking, do we really know all of our vendors that are creating, receiving, maintaining, or transmitting our patients' data? Are
Yep.
we holding them contractually responsible for privacy and security? If there's a breach, do they have and do we have a patient-centered approach to addressing that? That's what I would call governance in action.
Thank you so much for both your perspectives. And Sophie, as the user, was a bit skeptical about the remedies offered. What is the best way to handle breach notifications so patients understand that the help being offered is genuine and legitimate?
Yeah, and I love this question because from like other data breaches or other crimes, always comes the scammers behind, and people may receive like fake letters that they were compromised or
Yeah.
to give in more personal details. So in this case, if you receive a letter saying you have been breached and they are offering credit monitoring for free, you have to provide your personal information, social security, date of birth, address. So if this is not like a legit like email or mail, you probably are falling for a scam. So my
Yeah.
recommendation is always to reach out directly to the provider. In this case, if you receive a letter from Change Healthcare, go to their website. They probably have a specific blog post or a law firm that are like treating these type of cases that you will be able to reach out. In some other cases there may be a class action lawsuit that you may be able to also get information directly on how to handle this type of things. So even if you, it's like when you always receive a phone call from your financial institution, you
Yeah.
always have to say, you know what, I'm not going to give you my personal information because you're the one calling me. I'm going to call you back to the trusted numbers that I know, and I'm going to get that information to you directly through the trusted numbers. So it's the same logic, the same way that people should react when they receive a letter from they have been victims from a data breach. And of course it's like it's part of the law to notify customers or clients or patients that they've been involved in the data breach by mail. They have to send a letter, but the scammers know about this, so probably they may use it against the patients or the victims. So you always,
Yeah.
unfortunately, you always need to be aware of these type of things that is coming. So as I said, I would recommend to go directly to their website, and they always have
And
a
check it.
form or a way to reach out to them directly.
Got it. Thank you so much, Sophie. And Bob, many hospitals struggle with like tight budgets, limited resources, staffing shortages. What advice would you give leaders balancing patient care spending with cybersecurity investments?
This is one of my all-time favorite topics. I will tell
Yeah.
you where to begin. Well, first and foremost, I'll echo something we've said over and over again.
Yeah.
Think about the patients. Cybersecurity should not be in competition with other investments. Cybersecurity is all about patient safety. That's one point. Here's another point. The Electronic Health Records Incentive Program, which was spawned as a result of the HITECH Act, uh, filled the healthcare industry with $33 billion of incentive money to implement electronic health record systems. Where's all that money? How much of it was spent? I know it's a long time ago, but
Yeah.
how much of it was spent on
Exactly.
security? None. Now, my last point. We're in an industry, the healthcare industry consumes about 18 or 19% of our gross domestic product. At the end of 2023, I don't have more recent data, it was about a $5 trillion industry. $5 trillion. Some
Yeah.
people would estimate that 30% of what's being spent in the US healthcare system can be accounted for in the form of waste, fraud, and abuse. Where is some of that money going? Why aren't organizations going after that funding so that it can be redeployed and used
Hmm.
for stronger cyber risk management programs? Leaders have to invest in some of the basics.
Yeah.
Obviously, we talked about multi-factor authentication, network segmentation, et cetera, and then stand back and think about this whole matter of cyber risk management, not as being an independent silo and part of IT, but as part of a broader business risk management or enterprise risk management process. Then and only then will they begin to open the purse strings. And I'll make one final point.
Yeah.
Accountability. I do not believe that we are holding the board of directors, board of trustees, nor the executive teams accountable for privacy and security in their organization. I can go all the way back to the mid 1980s when the comptroller of the currency issued a memorandum that called for the board of directors of banks to become personally liable for the big security issue of the
Yeah.
disaster recovery plans. And more recently, roughly 2001, Sarbanes-Oxley said the CEO and the CFO are going to be personally liable for the integrity of the financial reporting. In those two cases, purse strings opened up and money was invested. We need something similar to be happening in healthcare, and it can't happen soon enough, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you so much for citing that example. And it is true that it is a pressing matter, and healthcare has been the number one attacked industry. So people should really take note of that. And Sophia, if you had one key piece of advice to every hospital CIO based on your incident response experience, what would that be?
Well, actually, it goes on Bob's line too. It's treat patient data as critical too. And why I'm saying this is because sometimes CIOs, they often overlook patient safety issue and they just treated them like an IT issue. But it's too often that we know that it is not an IT issue only, but the bridges directly impacts the patient's care, privacy, and most important is trust. Because once you lose the trust from your patient, they will
Yeah.
stop coming to your service. So it's very important that CROs or CSOs, they invest in regular risk assessments and most important, patch management. And that's the most important one because you relied on a third party vendor to provide you some services. So patching, it has to be at the top priority. And
Yeah.
as Bob mentioned too, MFA is very important. And the one I always talk about is staff training. Educate your staff on how to manage data, how to protect their accounts, because most of your staff are not tech savvy. So it's your job as a CIO or CSO to give this information to them, to train them, to educate them.
Yep. And Bob, if like, okay, we actually have a question coming in on LinkedIn at the moment. It is, what is your view on SRA tool and the app? Are there better alternatives in your experience? So, who would like to take this question?
I'm happy to respond, but I have to give you a bit of a disclaimer, first of all. Uh, I founded a company that actually built the industry leading security risk assessment tool. I am no longer associated with that company because we recently did a transaction, so I'm a little freer to mention it. The name of the company is Clearwater. It was founded in 2009. I exited just very recently. Clearwater developed a tool called IRM analysis, information risk management analysis. It has the track record, not only the software tool, but more importantly, the company in delivering security risk assessments, of having a perfect track record with the Office for Civil Rights when it has come to investigations and enforcements and in complying with so-called corrective action plans. So there are tools out there, and I know because before we built our tool, we were doing risk analyses with spreadsheets.
Yeah.
It's not possible. It's not possible. The combinatorial arithmetic of the number of assets, the number of threats, the number of vulnerabilities, the number of controls, it just explodes out of control. You
Yeah.
can't possibly do it without the assistance of a tool.
Thank you so much, Bob. And thank you for asking the question. Another reminder to all the viewers watching, you can drop your questions on our LinkedIn and our Substack chat. We are very happy to give you your answers right away in this open discussion. Now, Bob, the question to you, if a hospital CEO would take one concrete step tomorrow to strengthen cybersecurity, what should it be?
I can't do one. I have to do two.
It's
So
our,
my first one is tactical.
yeah.
And this is implement multi-factor authentication and enforce it throughout the organization. That should be a no-brainer, fall off the log, get it done kind of thing. And
Yeah.
strategically, it goes back to something that we've said several times in this session, and that is put cybersecurity on the board agenda and keep it there until you spin up and establish and begin to mature your enterprise cyber risk management program.
Thank you. And the question coming for is both for both of you. Attackers are evolving very quickly these days, as you know, with like AI and everything. Phishing done with AI to medical device exploitation. Which emerging healthcare risk concerns you the most, and what should organizations do to prepare? But would you like to go first?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And once again, at a tactical level, I would be concerned about AI-driven phishing attacks. I
Yeah.
would be concerned about the exploding number of biomedical devices that are either implanted in our patients or attached to our
Yeah.
patients. And I would be concerned about over reliance on critical vendors. tactically. Strategically, I think the single biggest risk that healthcare organizations face is one related to the failure to have a mature, robust enterprise cyber risk management program in place.
Sophie, would you like to follow up on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that Bob mentioned is like, what I'm really concerned about most is the speed at which attackers are evolving. And like, we're seeing a lot of ransomware that cause massive disruption. But now it is combined by what Bob mentioned as AI driven phishing campaigns that they trick stuff with highly convincing emails and personalized message. And there are very sophisticated platforms out there like Darkula, which is a phishing as a service, and is a Chinese language service that enables cyber criminals to launch sophisticated phishing campaigns. And they even have up to like 20,000 counterfeit domains. So anybody can go to this phishing as a service. They can just say, you know what, I want to target a specific company. They find a domain and they will be able to customize a very, very convincing like phishing email. So now cybercrime is automated, I can say, because you have these
Yeah.
phishing as a service platforms. And this is what really concerns me a lot, because they're still out there. And like Darkula, there are so many other platforms out there that are also offering this phishing as a service. So if you take one down, another one will pop
Another
up.
pops up. Yeah. Thank you so much. And to wrap things up, what's the one key piece of advice you'd give healthcare executives and one for frontline security teams, Bob?
Oh yeah, you keep narrowing us down to one, huh? So for executives, again, at the risk of being redundant, it's something we've said. You need to frame cybersecurity as a patient
Patient.
risk management, a patient safety issue. As it relates to the security teams, don't lose sight of the basics. Remember, you're going to have a long game as well as a short game, and some of the basics that we
Yeah.
talked about earlier, multi-factor authentication, network segmentation, et cetera.
And what about you, Sophie? I think I, your
Here,
audio
right?
is not.
Sorry. Like again, as always tell like every CSO or everyone that works with me is like educate your staff, and that's the first line of defense, because unfortunately like most of the cyber attacks come through like human intervention, specifically with these phishing emails that are very convincing, or like reusing credentials. So it's very important to actually like train your staff and treat your staff as part of your cybersecurity program too.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sophie, for your answer. And Bob, before we conclude, you've also written another book, Enterprise Cyber Risk Management as a Value Creator. Could you briefly share what it's about, why it matters beyond healthcare, and where can people find it?
Oh, well, yes, thank you. I appreciate you mentioning. So, a couple of quick things. One, it is not just focused on healthcare, although
Mhm.
everything in this new book is applicable to healthcare. The second thing is I turned the world upside down in the sense that don't think about cyber risk management, cybersecurity is all about and only about playing defense. You can play offense. You can actually create business value. You can help your organization grow. You can help your organization increase revenue. You can help your organization do a better job at social responsibility. You can build patient trust and brand loyalty. You can
Mhm.
facilitate other digital transformation projects that are going on in your organization. So think about it from the point of view of creating value. And in the book, I cite a number of examples and
Yeah.
organizations that have done just that. So it's a new, different perspective that I see some organizations adopting. Others are still playing a pure defense game. But I would encourage you to begin to think about creating value. If you want to get the attention of the board of directors, talk about the business and talk about growing the organization.
Thank you, Bob. And for those watching, if you want to get hands on Bob's book, you can just scan the QR that you see on the screen. And don't miss tomorrow's cyber briefing, where we will spotlight Bob's book and dig deeper into how leaders can leverage cybersecurity as a true value creator. Bob, it has been an absolute pleasure having you with us here today. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your insights with us.
As always, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Bob, for
you.
everything. And I think that people can reach out to you through LinkedIn, right? They can find you.
Yes, LinkedIn, and certainly as it relates to the book, you can find it on Amazon, and the publisher is A Press as well. So yes,
Awesome. Thank you, Bob.
you bet.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, everyone, don't go anywhere because Sophie and I are staying right here and we are going to bring you the top cyber headlines of the week in our cyber briefing segment. But before we begin, let's take a look at a quick video.
Stay ahead of the cyber curve with real-time alerts, incident reports, and the latest cybersecurity news, all in one streamlined, easy-to-read newsletter. Join more than 20,000 subscribers who rely on cyber briefing, available on LinkedIn, Medium, and now on Substack. Don't wait to protect your digital world. Subscribe today and stay informed with Cyber Briefing by Cyber Material.
Hello, Sophie. Welcome
Yeah.
back. And we're going to cover the top headlines right now. So, the first one is the FBI issues warning on spoofed IC3 website. So,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that? What happened there?
Yeah, so this was published on our cyber briefing on Monday, and it was something that the FBI sent an alert like late on a Friday, or I think it was Saturday, and it was very important because they issue a warning about scammers creating fake versions of the official Internet Crime Complaint Center website, which is the ic3.gov.
Yeah.
And these spoof sites are designed to steal personal information from the victims. So I will break it down a little bit. The IC3 is the FBI hub for reporting cybercrime. So everybody that needs to report identity theft or online scams to hacking to impersonation or anything related to your persona, people will be able to file a complaint. Now,
Yeah.
criminals are copying this site and sometimes changing just a single letter and or in the URL or switching the domain from .gov to .com, hoping to trick people who are used to trying, like who are trying to file a complaint into using the fake website.
Yeah.
Now, once people land on these websites and what is gonna be like spooking you, and that is the wrong website that you're in, they will ask for your sensitive data like name, addresses, phone numbers, emails, and even banking information. And I want to warn everybody is like the FBI, they very clearly said that they will never ask for money. They will never ask for banking details or personal information associated with your reports, with your complaint. So it's very important for you to know that the actual website, they won't ask for sensitive information. They will follow up with you to ask if they need some critical information. Now, my first number one advice will be just to directly type in your browser ic3.gov and file the complaint directly to them. Now, you have to check that the website has to earn in .gov and in .gov to ensure that it's official. And so most of the domains are issued to government websites. So everything that ends in .gov, it goes to government websites, official websites. So it's very important to actually like keep that in mind. And last thing, I will be like, of course, check the URL. And there's some SEO poisoning that some of these websites are showing on Google search. So you need to be careful to check if it's sponsored, and you will be able to see a website probably has been poisoned and is the wrong IC3 website.
Thank you so much for the practical advice that you just gave. And even the FBI has issued the warning. So be careful, go to the right website. And if you see something, make sure to say something and report it. And the next one is actually about the airport systems and cyber attack hits Europe airport systems. So what happened there?
So this news has two parts because it has developed so fast since it happened last Friday afternoon. So we included this on the cyber briefing on Monday too, because it happened later on the Friday. So what happened was that on Friday, September 19th, a lot of disruption through major airports in Europe happened. So what was exactly the issue was that the software that they use for checking, which is developed by the RTX company, it's a Collins Aerospace, was disrupted. And it looks like it was caused, and I'm going to the second part of this news. It was caused by a ransomware. So ENISA, which is a cyber organization from the European Union, they said that it was linked to a ransomware attack. Now,
Okay.
most major airports like in London, Berlin, Brussels, they were victims of this because they were using the software. Now, what happened here is that they were able to narrow it down to a ransomware. So they were able to recover right away because they had backups. So they put the system back online again.
Yeah.
And if you want, we can go to the last part, which is the end of this news.
Yeah. Where the UK arrests a suspect in
Yes.
the RTX ransomware. Yeah. So this was all part of that one event.
One event. So it was like very fast. Like
Yeah.
Friday was the issue. Monday, they
Wow.
were able to pinpoint that it was ransomware. Tuesday, they arrested a suspect. Now, what I want to say, this is the disclaimer. Authorities, they arrested a man, he was in his 40s in connection with this ransomware attack. It
Yeah.
happened on Tuesday, September 23rd, and they used the Computer Misuse Act to arrest him. Now, this person has been released since he was arrested as investigations continue. So he's released on bail. Now, authorities, they haven't disclosed the identity of this person because they are still investigating. But they believe that the ransomware strain that they used for this attack was from the Locky family. That
Yeah.
both are ransomware as a service tools typically employed in smaller scale attacks. So this still evolving, this still under investigation,
Yeah.
but they were able to actually find someone in connection with this ransomware.
And it's actually good to see that, the government and the police are actually active about this and are trying to figure out what truly happened. And that's actually a relief to hear.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's great. And we always try to end with a positive news among all the incidents, which are bad news
Yeah.
most of the time.
Yeah.
And the alert. It's very important to keep in mind about scams that are going on out there. So I will recommend everybody to subscribe to Cyber Briefing to get the latest alerts
Yeah.
on what are the newest scams, new strains of malware, new ransomware scams out there, or any patch. Because if you're a cybersecurity team, it's very good to be like informed of the new
Yeah.
patches. There has been a few from Cisco this week's too that people they need to patch their iOS, and it's very important because there's a critical vulnerability happening on right now. So
Okay.
as we always try to use one of each, it's best for you to subscribe to Cyber Briefing.
Yes, because there are so many things happening and so many alerts happening. We are trying to do one for each. It's actually what Sophie says is correct. Subscribe to us so that you do not miss a critical update through the week. And that wraps up for today's cyber briefing. A big thank you to our special guest, Bob, who joined us earlier today, and of course, co host Sophie for breaking down the week's top stories with me. Thank you so much for watching, you guys, and especially for those who joined us live and shared your questions. Thank you so much for your questions. We will be coming back again on Thursday, October 2. You can mark your calendars so that you don't miss it. Make sure that you show up tomorrow to our cyber briefing because we will be covering Bob's book and we will be talking in depth about it and how it can help executives, and you will learn much more. Subscribe to our Substack. We will cover that in depth there as well. We also have a segment on Substack for the jobs, for the events, for everything that you need to know about cybersecurity. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for our next Ask Me Anything Cyber, a fun, interactive weekly event for everything cybersecurity. Join us every week at noon Eastern Time for another high-energy recap of the week's biggest cyber stories, from data breaches and threat intel to major legal updates. Whether it's a high-profile hack, a new APT on the rise, or a must-attend summit, we've got it covered. But that's not all. We'll also break down the latest job market trends, share our thoughts on cyber stocks, and give you actionable insights to stay ahead. And of course, we wrap things up with what makes this show special, live Q&A with you. Have a question about a breach? Want to know how a threat works? Curious about getting started in cyber? Let us know and we'll answer it live. See you next week.